Hello everyone. I wanted to show you guys this build of the TTF2 Unity project directly, of what I've gotten done so far. This is the first video on this, so it's going to be pretty early on. For those of you that don't know what this project is, I recommend you guys go check the video out in the description. That video goes over, in an edited format, nice and clean format, of the reasons why I'm doing this project, what the goals are, etc., things like that. Because I won't be going over stuff like that. I just want to go over directly what's in this build and what I've done so far. I suppose I should start off with the movement, I suppose, right? Like, it's one of the first things I started working on. The first thing I should say about the movement is that I actually used a movement script by the person named Olezen. They had a video showing off source engine-like movements done in the Unity engine, and it was all open source, so I managed to use that script as a basis for this project, use it as a starting point. And I modified it from there to be more like TF2 specifically, not just source engine in general, I suppose. Like, for example, one of the TF2 specific things, at least I think it's specific to TF2, is that whenever you're on the ground, the velocity of your character is hard clamped to the character's like set max speed. So, for example, Soldier has a max speed of 240 hammer units, and regardless of what slope surface I go on, the net hammer velocity is always going to be clamped at 240. The main reason I believe that's in the game is to prevent bunny hopping and stuff. Like, you can't carry speed from a rocket jump to try to bunny hop and carry speed. And not just rocket jumping, you could just air strafe too to gain speed, which is just like the source engine. And the air strafing works pretty much exactly how it works in TF2. If you wanted to, you could air strafe with the forward and back keys too. If you go move sideways, that's also an option. But yeah, there's not much to go over because the movement in general is pretty similar to TF2 as is, and there's not much like new for me to show you other than perhaps the capsules. Instead of using the box gliders for your world movement, you have capsules for player movement. So that means if you start moving off a ledge, your rounded collision is going to start sliding off a little bit. And yeah, that's just a side effect of using a capsule collider for your player movements. Ideally, I would prefer for the player move to be a cylinder, because if it was a cylinder, you wouldn't like start trooping down a ledge as you walk down like this. You would stay at the level of the surface down here. You wouldn't troop below it. But there's no real solution for a good cylinder collider or anything like that. That's it's hard to explain why, but generally a cylinder is way harder to calculate effectively than a capsule. I won't go into the mathematics behind all that and geometry behind that, and because it's pretty complicated and I don't even know if I fully understand it. I just know that capsules are effectively just distance checks, and whenever you check distance, it's pretty much just going to be a circle or a sphere depending on whether it's 2D or 3D. And capsules are basically just infinite spheres from the top point to bottom point, and kind of something like that, I think. It's just what makes them easier to calculate. They're just distance checks. They're not complex geometry, having to do complex collision or intersection checks and whatnot. But yeah, other than that, there's also crouch jumping, of course. Though crouch jumping isn't as necessary, because this capsule actually kind of gives you extra jump heights. Not necessarily in the actual jump heights, but like you can actually kind of like climb up ledges now that you couldn't climb up before without a crouch jump, like this ledge here in Badwater. You would normally need a crouch jump to make this jump every time in the original game, but you don't have to here because of the capsule's rounded bottom allows you to grab onto the floor a little bit earlier than normal. Again, that's just a side effect of using a capsule, and I think I'm willing to accept that. But if there's ever a map I get to porting over and there's like a problem with the map design where the extra jump height that you have for your default jump height, basically, you can jump up to higher ledges than normal. If it starts breaking the map, I might change the map design to accommodate for it slightly. That's just something I'll have to do. Also, speaking of that topic, if I go over here, one of the changes to the map design I need to make to Badwater that needs to accommodate this kind of collision is this skill jump here. This skill jump was in the original TF2. You can climb up here and just jump up. But it's a little bit more awkward because it's way easier to just slip right off like that. Normally, your very sharp corners in your box collision will prevent you from sliding off like that. But sometimes if you try to make this jump right now, I've gotten decent at it, but it's easier to just slip off. So what I would have to do is just extend this bridge loop and this piece of geometry out a little bit, just extrude it a little bit. I'll do it on the other side as well, just so that it's not as awkward to get up here. Make it just about as easy / hard as the original game. Just accommodate the new collision. And yeah, might as well talk about this now. I have Badwater imported right now. The payload map Badwater from Team Fortress 2. And it's missing some things. If you know this map at all, you know there's missing detail. The thing about this is that the only thing I was able to import in as a model was the map geometry itself. So that means only hammer displacements and hammer brushes were able to get exported and imported into Unity directly. All props, so that includes all the rock formations and everything, and the door frames and a lot of other things. All of them are missing because they are models that are not directly baked into the map. They're just models from somewhere else that I have to import in. I don't know if there's a way to import all the positions of the models and what the names are of the models that I need to put in, because I don't know if I really... It doesn't sound entirely fun to place in all the props back in exactly how they were. That seems like something that could be automated just by having the right tools for the job, but I don't know if I have the right tools for the job. I don't know if there is a tool available to do that job. If anyone that works with the Source Engine and does stuff like that, exporting maps to different formats for other programs, and needs to bring in other objects and models that comes with the map that isn't baked into the map, just if you happen to be someone like that, please let me know if you have any information whether or not that's possible or not. That'd be nice to know. Also, I wanted to show something that's still a bit of a concern for the translation of movement from TF2 to this game. It's the one thing I don't know for sure if I'll be able to pull off properly, and that's surfing. To explain what surfing is, basically if you ever are on a ledge that's like heavily slanted, that's past 45 degrees, and you're standing still, you're just gonna slide off of it normally. That I could probably do, but there's some very weird quirks with Source Engine surfing that's not just that. Like, for example, you can surf up even less steep slopes like this one if you're moving fast enough. That I don't know for sure if I can do, because there's a lot of weird rules with how surfing works in Source Engine games, and I don't know if I'll be able to translate it all perfectly. It's a lot of math that goes over my head, and the Source Engine movement basis script I had didn't have support for surfing, really. It's the one major thing it was missing, and it's a pretty vital part to TF2, especially when it comes to rollouts on like competitive maps and stuff. There's a lot of surfing off of things to roll out faster, and that's currently not possible. I do want to make it possible, it's just I don't know where to really make that a reliable one-to-one representation of how it works at TF2 and bring it into here. Anyways, that's also another thing I might ask for help for anyone that happens to know the Source Engine enough to know the math behind surfing and stuff, or just knows their way around the Source Engine source code. I could also use some guidance there. Like I've said in the main video, I don't consider myself a programmer necessarily. Like I could look at the source code of the Source Engine myself too if I wanted to. But my ability to understand the C++ code is very lackluster. I don't consider myself a programmer, really. It's not my thing. I could work my way around C# in Unity because of how easy it is and how many resources out there to help beginners out to understand the coding language. But trying to understand the source code of the Source Engine using a language I don't fully understand, lack a whole lot of knowledge on it, it's probably not going to be ideal. So, yeah, again, asking for help is probably the best option I have for that. I also have some weird movement quirks with slopes in general right now. The first thing is that sometimes on steep slopes like this, your movement speed is not really accelerating to what it should be. Like, again, the hammer velocity that you see in the center of the screen here, it should be going up to 240, but when I walk straight forward like this, it's not reaching that. It's going quite below that. It's about 90% of the speed that it should be reaching. However, if I move sideways, I actually manage to reach that target. So there's some weird things I still need to work out regarding slope movements. Another weird quirk with slope movements, if I go over here, to get fairly technical for a second here, the thing I'm doing to get slope movement working smoothly, where you can move up and down slopes fairly smoothly, like this. What I have is I'm doing a sphere cast to represent my feet, my lower part of the capsule. I'm doing a cast of that, and I'm using that sphere cast to cast where I will be the frame ahead. Like before I start doing the physics calculations and stuff, I do a sphere cast ahead, and seeing where the floor level is, and then I change my velocity accordingly to make sure I move up or down along that slope. That's defined where that is. There's also a problem with that. Sometimes with ledges, it might cast and think this is a slope, and it'll start like launching me upwards like this. I'm not jumping here. That's the script that I'm talking about doing that. That's the sphere cast, and it's moving me up. And it's a pretty janky. That's one thing I need to figure out a way around. And again, if anyone happens to know a better solution regarding how to handle slope movements in general, obviously that's a fairly big problem right now with this build is slopes. Please do let me know. I could use all the help I can get regarding movements and stuff in this, especially when it comes to slopes. Because yeah, this whole thing is kind of disruptive. Sometimes it just flings you up when you just want to walk over a little step like this. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. So, anywho, the next thing I want to talk about is the animations. I went over a lot of that in the main video, because in that general video I made below in the description is using this build. So most of what I talk about in that video applies here regarding the animation. So like I said in that video, there is walking animation specific to your walking direction. Walking forward has a slightly different animation for the view model than walking backwards. As you can see, there's a bit more side to side when walking forward than there is walking backwards, and there's a bit more lean to left or right when you walk side to side like this. And on top of that, there's also a bit of a view bob when walking forward. I think I will have an option for people to turn the view bob off, because obviously, especially if it's tuned too intensely, it could mess with people's aim and stuff. So for one, I might tune it down a little bit from what it is right now, but on top of that, I think I'll have an option for people to turn it off for people that don't want the view bob, because that's definitely something that could mess with people. But the idea is I don't really want that to get in the way, but I still want it there to help sell the animation a bit more. But regardless of what I feel about that, I will have a toggle for people not to have that on, because I know not everyone's going to really like that. Other aspects of the animation I didn't specifically talk about is you see the this aim sight on the soldier's rocket launcher. That now responds to physics. In the original TF2, that thing doesn't really respond to movement that much. It only animates based off of what's baked in the animation itself in first person. All the movement now is done through gigaphysics, essentially. What it's actually called in Unity is called dynamic bones, which is a add-on you can get in the Unity store to add basically gigaphysics to bones and stuff. Regarding some other things about the view model, the static pose for the view model changes slightly depending on how vertically you're aiming. So if you're aiming down, the gun gets a bit closer and is pushed up a little bit more. And moving up kind of does the opposite. That's just to make the view model not feel as static. That's just there to make the view model not feel as still or as static as it did before. It helps make the view model feel more attached to your own movement and where you're aiming. And they also have jumping animations. What it really is just falling animations, and it's just triggering on and off depending on whether or not you're airborne. So this, even if you're not jumping and you're just falling off something, let me get up here. Here we go. So if I were to just fall down this ledge, I'll also be in this falling state in the animation, and then once I land, I enter the landing animation. And basically, whenever you're moving up, so like when you start jumping, your view model is actually going to start lowering a little bit as you start rising. But as soon as you start falling down, the view model is actually going to start moving up. as you start falling down, which you're able to see more obviously when you jump off a building. You see the view model just rise quite a bit as you start gaining speed. So if I jump off this high building here, boom, you just fall for a while and gain a bunch of speed. You can see that fully in action there. And also the plan is to also allow people to change their view model field of view. So that basically just means making the view model smaller on screen. It takes up less screen space. And there's also going to be a toggle, just like TF2, to turn on minimal view models, which essentially moves the view model down a bit and makes it look smaller and takes up less screen space too. I'll have both options available. They're not in this build yet because I don't really have an options menu at the moment, but once I have that going, I'll add those options as soon as I can because those are going to be pretty simple to add. Also, another thing that I have built into this game now is ragdolls. You might have seen me enable it a few times earlier just to refill my health, but I can just ragdoll myself like that. I don't know if I can make it close to how the Source Engine handled ragdolls, because Unity has its own physics system, and it's not entirely like the Source Engine. I think the Source Engine is carried by the Havoc's, the Havoc physics engine. I think that's a thing, the main thing it gets the physics data from. I think Unity has its own proprietary thing, and it's probably going to be a little bit different, inherently speaking. I'll see what I can do to make it more similar, but it's still pretty good right now. And also the ragdoll sound effects, just like the original. Yeah, nice and squishy. But yeah, it also happens whenever you actually kill yourself, when you reach 0 HP. The velocity added to your ragdoll lines up with how much velocity you had right before you died. That includes whenever you hit yourself with an explosive. So if I did a rocket jump as I died, I fly into the air. Boom. And of course, speaking of health, I have the health indicator on the top, bottom left. It works pretty much exactly how it works in the original game. I tried to make it pretty much one-to-one because there's no reason to really change that. It's a fairly good health indicator, in my opinion. Whenever you start reaching slightly below half health, your health bar will turn red. And when you take a little bit more damage than that, it will start blinking in the border. And the more damage you take, the bigger that border will be. Which is exactly how the original default HUD in TF2 worked. I also have a work-in-progress overheal HUD element, just like that. Just like the red indicator is going to be a flashing border around your health bar and all that. It's just I don't have a way to put on overheal with this build right now because it's all just work-in-progress and it's not finished yet anyway. But yeah, that's also going to be a thing pretty soon. And also to the side of that, to the right, we have the ammo indicator. There's nothing too special about it. It just reads a bunch of numbers, what's in your clip and what's in reserve. It's that simple. There's not much else to it. It's pretty simple. But I suppose I should talk about the primary animations a little bit for the first-person view. I didn't talk about that earlier. I forgot to, actually. But for the main primary, we have the base idle animation, we have the fire animation, and the reload. The firing and the reloading is still ripped straight from the original game, though I do think I want to change them a little bit. I want to reanimate them a little bit. I don't think I'll be reanimating every gun in the game. I'll probably still be reusing some animations, but even though these firing and reloading animations are original, they are from the original game, they still get influenced by all that additive animation that is related to like falling and walking around and stuff. So it's not like I had to make walk animations for every primary action. Like I didn't have to make a walk animation for firing, not a walk animation for reloading and stuff like that. No, that's not necessary. I just have an additive walking animation that's applying the primary to the primary motion of the view model. And also, just like the original TF2, I might as well bring this up. You can interrupt your reload by shooting. Like that's a pretty essential feature of the game. So why would I change that? And yeah, for the third-person animations, I haven't done a whole lot of work for it yet. I just have the bare minimum of the basic walk animation and the idle. There's not much else I've done, other than some aim matrices for walking forward, other than some aim matrices for standing still, and also walking forward and slightly side to side. I don't have them set up for walking backwards yet, or sideways. The aim matrix just doesn't exist yet, so the aim just goes back to neutral whenever I start moving in a direction that doesn't have an aim matrix yet. But other than that, there's not much else to talk about for third person yet, but of course I do plan to implement as much as I can from the original game, because it's most of the third person animation is going to be ripped from the original game, because there's no reason to really touch those too much, because the third person animations from the original game are actually pretty good. There's no reason to adjust them too much other than just fix some of the jankiness with the aim matrices. That's probably the main part of the third person models that don't work too well in the original game, is the aim matrices being very janky. In this game, they were going to be a little bit more polished and less weird, to say the least. And yeah, I don't have any other animation really imported yet. There's no jumping animation, no falling animation, no crouch animation, like I'm crouching right now, and there's no animation for it yet. Alright, next thing I want to talk about is the rocket launcher itself, like the actual weapon and what it does in the game right now. Yeah, there's a lot for me to talk about, because this is a build I've been working on for 2 weeks, and there's a lot I have to introduce and talk about. Any future videos I make just going over the build will definitely not be as long as this, but gotta talk about a lot. So, just like the original TF2, you can shoot around corners. Despite my cursor looking straight at the wall, you can still shoot around corners like this, because the rockets come out of your right side of your model, because that's where your rocket launcher is being held. Projectiles in TF2 have always acted like this, and of course, I have no reason to change that, so it's going to be exactly how it was in the original, for, well, at least as close as it is to the original as I can. And as you can see, the rocket launcher doesn't have any sort of visual effects right now. It's just a rocket model launching out of the model, and that's it. Nothing too crazy going on there. The only damage model I have for the rocket launcher is self-damage. I don't have a damage model set up when damaging other players right now. That's a system I want to start figuring out once I start implementing multiplayer code into the game. I gotta figure out all that stuff first, because I don't want to start coding all this damage model stuff and end up figuring out, oh, I totally approached that entirely wrong, because it doesn't accommodate for multiplayer. So I just want to be sure multiplayer's in first before I do that. But yeah, self-damage. It's fairly close to how it was in the original, but given the differences in your collider size and stuff, the self-damage you take when blasting yourself right against the wall while standing is a little bit different from the original game, just inherent to your collider difference. And the same applies to whenever you shoot yourself. Why was I stuck there? I'm stuck. Oh god. Bugs. I'm gonna try to fix that. Anyway, as I was saying, when you look straight down and shoot yourself, I think you even take a little bit less damage, just because of the collider differences at the moment. It also might be due to the origin of the collider. I think damage is based off of the origin in TF2, and in this too, but the origin in TF2 is at your feet, and I think the origin right now in this setup in Unity is actually at your center, like at center of mass. So it's farther away from the ground, and therefore you take less damage. I don't know if I want to change that or not. It seems to be working fine as is, and I don't know if it's that important to change. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is it really that important to change something like that? Or, I don't know. Do you guys care? I don't know. I really don't know. I don't care too much. It doesn't affect the actual rock jumping too much, so I don't know. Anyway. So yeah, when it comes to self-damage, there's a thing in TF2 where you take more self-damage as Soldier, and this only applies to the Soldier, really. No other class, even Demoman, not even Demoman's like this. Whenever you shoot yourself with explosive, with splash damage, you take a ton of damage, right? But not when you're jumping. When you're airborne, you take a lot less damage, and that's also carried over to this version of the game as well. So, again, if I shoot myself right at the wall, I take just about 80 damage or so. But as soon as I jump, I take a lot less damage. And you can try this out in the original TF2 as well. If you aren't aware of this mechanic, I'm not sure how many people are, and if you try to rocket jump and you don't jump, you just take a ton of damage. But when you actually rocket jump properly, by jumping first, you take a lot less damage. And of course, crouching while rocket jumping is fairly important, because just like in the original TF2, when you crouch, you reduce your collision box size, and when you have a reduced collision box size, the knockback calculations change to where you take more knockback. So if I try to rocket jump up here without crouching, I'm going to barely make it. Barely. But if I jump and crouch, I go a lot higher. And I believe I've tuned it to the point where it's fairly close to the original. There might be still a few things I need to changed to make that more close, but it's fairly close where you probably won't notice it unless you perhaps are trying to do a very, very specific rocket jump rollout or something that's very, very tight, and you normally don't make it if you mess it up slightly, stuff like that. You might feel a difference there if you try to reach the limits of rocket jumping, but the basics of rocket jumping is fairly close to original, as is right now. And also another thing about Soldier specifically, again, very specific to Soldier, is that normally when you take more damage, you take more knockback. So you would think taking more damage while not jumping will give you more knockback. But no, that's not the case. Because Soldier has a specific modifier preventing it from getting a lot of extra height from a rocket jump that isn't used while jumping. So you don't go very high if you don't jump. If you're any other class that wasn't Soldier, then you go flying. But Soldier doesn't have that. That's not a thing with Soldier. Valve specifically made a system with Soldier to where rocket jumping, you had to jump in order for it to work well. Oh yeah, another thing about that slope thing I was talking about earlier. That jumping thing activates whenever you're even touching a very, 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 very steep slope or ledge and stuff like that. Like it still makes you jump. Again, that's the thing I need to figure out. Or maybe someone can help me regarding this. I forgot to mention this. Yeah, it's pretty janky. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to talk about regarding the mechanics, I think. So I think I'm going to move on to the visuals right now. Obviously, we look at this bad water right now, and it looks kind of like crap. And it's because there's no materials, no textures or anything. Those aren't imported yet. It's just like the models of the props and rocks that should be like here and here. They aren't baked into the map themselves. Those are texture files, texture images and stuff that they need to be re-imported and reapplied. But that's for later. I don't know if there's going to be an easy way to do that without just reapplying it to every single surface and try to make it pretty close to how it was in the original. Or maybe I should use new texture maps that it's a bit more detailed and high resolution. I'm not sure if I want to do that because the textures in TF2 have a specific art style as well. I don't know. I'm pretty undecided regarding that whole texture thing regarding the terrain and stuff. I don't know yet. Not sure. But right now I would have to ask you guys to not pay attention too much to the textures or the lack of textures right now, because that's clearly going to be a thing I'll be doing later. It's just solid color for everything right now. Everything's the same exact color. The only texture technically being used right now is the light maps. So you can see baked in lighting across the surfaces. That's about it. And also there's some weird quirks with it. I think this is actually ambient occlusion. No, maybe not. Okay, now that's actually baked lighting being buggy there. I don't know. Yeah, I gotta work some things out with the baked lighting, but for the most part, it looks pretty good. Otherwise, this would be fairly flat looking in the dark. So yeah, baked lighting is pretty good. I don't think I expect to have too many issues with baked lighting in the future. It seems to be pretty good. But yeah, let's talk about the dynamic shadows, which is a bit more interesting of a topic. So, hello, you can see yourself. You can see your own shadow. I am very unsure whether or not I want to keep this. Obviously, I don't have the gun visible right now in the shadow. That doesn't work in first person yet. It works in third person, but not in first person. I need to work that out. But I really think it might be a good idea to show your shadow in first person so that you are aware of where your shadow is. So like, for example, if you're just hiding around this corner, you'd think you'd be entirely hidden away from someone around here, like trying to peek, trying to walk around this corner like this. They might not expect you, but your shadow's visible, and they're going to see your shadow. But if you don't see your own shadow, you're not going to be entirely aware of this unless you happen to be hyper aware of your own shadow despite not being able to see it. Most people aren't going to be thinking about that. The main reason I want to show your shadow in first person is so that you can be aware of where your shadow is and try to make sure your shadow is also obscured around the corner so that it doesn't get found out. Because a lot of there's situations in the original TF2 where your shadow can give your position away, even through unintended means, like your shadow appearing on the opposite side of the wall where it should be in the original TF2. That's a bug that's really weird. TTF2 source engine specifically, and that's not really going to happen here because the lighting system is completely different. There might be some lighting bugs that might happen in Unity, of course, but they won't be the same as the source engine because it's just a different lighting engine. But yeah, third-person shadows and first-person. Do you guys like it? Do you guys think it's weird or obnoxious, or do you like the idea of being able to see your own shadow so that you can be aware of its position and where people can see your own shadow and stuff? I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. I'm probably gonna keep it unless people don't like the idea though. So yeah, let me know. When it comes to your actual character, I have a custom shader set up for any sort of TF2 item, weapon, or character where it uses a custom light warp, which essentially just means toon shading. And the light warps I'm using is straight from TF2, so the transition from dark to light is pretty much exactly how it is in the original game. But now there's also dynamic shadows that influences the light warp. So you can see the light warp from the dynamic shadows from my rocket launcher on my backside here is now applied. That's not a thing that happened in the original TF2. Dynamic shadows being casted on character models or any models that were dynamic was not really ever a thing in TF2. That's just not. The game is so old and with such an old engine, and they had to target the hardware that existed back then in 2007 and all that. There was they couldn't just add dynamic shadows back then and expect a good performance, I imagine. Because I think the source engine back then did support dynamic shadows. It was just something that they didn't want to implement to a game like this because of performance reasons. I imagine. Again, I'm speculating here. I'm kind of just giving my own reasons why I think I wouldn't do it if I was doing this back in the day. But today, there's no reason not to have dynamic shadows. It helps make the game look better. It makes it look more complete and not as janky looking. Because transitioning from dark to light, like whenever you hide into a shadow, you actually get shadows casted onto you from the terrain, which is unlike the original TF2, where whenever a part of your model lost line of sight with the sun, that model just turned dark for no reason. Like it's pretty arbitrary. But now there's an actual shadow system in place to actually handle all that shading that makes it look way better and less cheap or arbitrary. It looks more convincing. And also for those of you that might be curious on how I managed to make a custom shader so easily, what I did was I used a node-based shader system in Unity called Amplify Shader. I know Unity has its own shader graph and stuff. However, shader graph only works for Universal and HDRP rendering pipelines, and I'm not using either of them. I'm using Unity's base rendering system, so I can't use shader graph, but I can still use Amplify Shader, which is a add-on you can buy, which basically just helps you make your own custom shaders. And what I have here is the shader set up to handle that TF2-like shading. And I've worked a lot with nodes in Blender before, with handling a lot of materials and stuff. So learning my way around the Amplify Shader node system was not too hard for me, specifically. And I've been working with Amplify for about a year now with other projects too, so yeah, it wasn't too bad to work with this. It was fairly straightforward for me. Also, yeah, the Fresnel Effect too, I forgot. The Fresnel Effect was added into TF2, in the base TF2s, to help make characters stand out and have better contrast, regardless of whatever surface was around them or behind them or whatever. Because you don't want visibility issues in a game like this. You want to see players clearly, regardless of lighting conditions and stuff. And mind you, I think the original TF2 had some problematic visibility despite that. And that's also something I plan to address. And also, speaking of the shader, I did what I could to implement all the texture maps in TF2 properly. So there's not a lot of resources out there explaining what all the texture maps do, like the exponent map for a lot of weapons in the game and stuff. I don't know exactly for sure, but there's a lot of stuff about that uses specific color channels for specific aspects of the shader. Like, for example, you can see parts of my rocket launcher is more shiny than other parts of it, and that's using a texture map that comes from the original game that I believe is used for this purpose. And there's also the alpha channel in the main color texture too that influences the shading a little bit too, regarding I think the Fong exponent thing. I don't know. No, I think that was the exponent texture. So I can't remember how I implemented it. I just tweaked what maps influenced what parts of the shading until it looked about right to me. but I'm not sure if it's all entirely accurate how it was in the original game. If you happen to know how TF2 handled that kind of stuff, also let me know. Again, I'm asking for help a lot. I happen to not know everything about TF2, you know. I'm trying to do a lot of things on my own, and trying to do everything is not entirely, I guess, realistic, because it's just a lot of things to do, know how to do, and know how they work in the original TF2, and how to re-implement them back into Unity and stuff. It's a lot to do. I think I've been doing a fairly good job regarding that, despite me being on my own, but there are still some things I would like to know how to do, or how they work and all that. Oh yeah, fall damage. I didn't talk about that yet, did I? There's not much to talk about, honestly. It's about how it would be in the original game in terms of how much damage you take based on how long you fell, how far you fell, and all that. However, there is one thing I did to tweak it a little bit compared to the original. Whenever you walk off a ledge in this version of the game, you sort of get launched down a little bit because of your capsule. Your capsule kind of makes you move down as you walk off a ledge, so you start moving down faster. So I had to compensate for that a little bit. And what I did is I increased the threshold of velocity you had to be traveling in order to take fall damage in the first place. I bumped it up a little bit, so you have to be going a slightly faster in order to start taking damage. And hopefully that should make it so that all the points where you can walk off a ledge and not take fall damage can still work properly. Because if I didn't do that, there's probably some ledges on some maps where if you walk off the ledge, you take fall damage, where in the original game you wouldn't. But as a consequence of that, rocket jumping is a bit more safe, just slightly. It's not that noticeable, but it is slightly more safe. You won't take fall damage as easily. It's probably going to be pretty hard to find that borderline threshold while just randomly rocket jumping, but yeah, it's that's the idea. That's the main thing I just want to talk about real quick. The fall damage I forgot to talk about. I think next time I'll have an outline of what I want to talk about regarding my build. I didn't have that prepared. I just sort of just talked about things as I went on. Though granted, I will have less things to talk about next time. This is just me going over literally everything I've done, pretty much. Anywho, I think the last thing I want to talk about is the Crosshair. The Crosshair is going to be fairly interesting. So in this game, I'm going to be reworking how the Crosshair works. For the rocket launcher, it's not going to really be doing much, but for other weapons that has random spread to consider, I will be implementing a feature that actually changes the crosshair depending on the state of your weapon and how it's going to be firing accurate shots, or whether or not it's going to be doing that. Okay, so let me actually show you this. Alright, so this is the crosshair. You can see it on this canvas here. This is the crosshair. However, it might not seem like it, but this crosshair is actually just a mesh that's rendered onto a render texture and then added into the HUD itself as an overlay. So if I go into Blender, you can see I actually have this model file prepared, and this is where I set up the system to handle the crosshair. So yeah, the mesh part of it is meant so that I can change the shape of the crosshair to exactly how I want it to, easily. So if the weapon, for example, has random spread, like a revolver or a pistol, where the first shot is perfectly accurate, but as you keep shooting it actually gets more random. In TF2 is actually just the first shot that's perfectly accurate, and all shots after that are just as inaccurate as any other shot. But in this Unity version, I might change that a little bit to be less sharp of a transition. We'll see. But anyway, the crosshair is going to be able to do this, where it's able to enlarge based off of the state of the gun, whether or not I can shoot an accurate shot or not. And I can also shrink the crosshair based on how accurate it's going to be as well, using shape keys. All of them are shape key driven. And as you can see, I have this system in place. So yeah, this is a mesh, but it's a rendered version, a rendered texture of that mesh that's getting applied to the HUD, pretty much. So it's able to expand and shrink down like this. I don't have any weapons in the game that's actually capable of doing this yet, because again, the rocket launcher has only one state to consider, which is its perfectly accurate state. So that's not really a big deal for that gun. For the pistols and even maybe the shotgun, I might have the crosshair enlarge and shrink very, very quickly just to sell the effects of the shotgun going off. I won't actually implement any random spread that will increase the longer you shoot it out to the shotguns. I'm not going to be doing stuff like that. They're going to stay pretty much exactly the same as the original game, but yeah, that's the idea. I want the crosshair to feel more dynamic and useful. So yeah. Also, I also want to show the where is this? Here we are. So I can also affect the outline intensity of the crosshair. I mean, the crosshair outline can be adjusted by user inputs once I have the options menu set up. That is not currently implemented. I have to do this within the editor, but I can change the intensity of the outlines to either hide it completely, and when you hide it completely, you can change the size of the standard color of the crosshair. You can change the color of the crosshair if you wished to any color you like, things like that. So yeah, there will be some crosshair customizability, just like in the TTF2, where you can tint your crosshair color. Of course, TTF2's crosshairs are not all that great, especially if you make the crosshairs bigger. They get very, very pixelated, just sort of like this. But however, the resolution of this crosshair is actually quite large, because you don't really see that pixelation until you get really, really close. And in the actual build, it's very, very not pixelated. I can make this crosshair a lot bigger and still not show any of that pixelation. And even if it starts showing up, if for people that want to make that crosshair really, really big for some reason, I can increase the render texture resolution so that the pixelation doesn't show up and actually stays very, very crystal clear. So yeah, I think I covered everything now. No, I did not cover everything. This is me in the future. I forgot to cover something. Communication wheel. So one of the things about the original game I wanted to address is its janky user interface that can feel kind of awkward to use. Generally, it wasn't a huge problem in TF2 per se. It's not always a factor, and all of it has to do with the communication voice commands in the original game, as well as some menus specific to some classes, like the engineer and spy having their build menus, or spy disguise kit and whatnot. All of those things I want to change to where they use a communication wheel that will give them very quick and easy access to all the commands that you'd want to use. So in the original game, if I wanted to say yes, I'd have to click Z and then try to hit 7 while still trying to move around and stuff with my other fingers, and that's kind of awkward to do. Or I could just rebind the key, I guess, but that's just if I wanted to say yes. But what if I wanted to use some other command? Do I have to bind that to something else? No. The easiest way to make all of these voice commands easily accessible quickly with only one button is to make a PAM menu like this. And like I said, I do plan to have a menu like this for the Spy Disguise Kit and the build menu as well. For the Spy Disguise Kits, I'll have a feature where if you do a mouse click, you can toggle which team you want to disguise as well. So if you want to disguise as a teammate, you can do that as well using a mouse click. But if you don't want to disguise as a teammate, you can just not click at all, just hover over and release the button. And Spy's button would just be holding B. You'd hold B to bring up the disguise kit if you wanted, or maybe even the 4 key as well if you wanted to use that, because the 4 key was the Spy Disguise Kit button in the original game. But I don't know. That's the plan anyway. But yeah, voice commands.
Incoming! Ready for that hit it, Doc. Let's go. Ready for that hit it, Doc. Let's go. Ready for that charge, Doc. Need some help here? Medic! 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 Medic!
Obviously, I don't have a cooldown yet for the voice commands. That'll be later. Main priority was just to get it working in the first place. The cooldown can be done later. It's going to be fairly straightforward to do that anyway. So, yeah. Back to my past self. It's about time. Definitely next time it's not going to be nearly as long as this. For one, I'll plan out better what I want to talk about. But also, I won't have as much to talk about because there won't be as huge of a jump of progress as there is from nothing to this. That's kind of what it is. There was nothing before, and now there's this. Now I've talked about a lot of the basis. Now I can actually just talk about the other smaller improvements in the next video I make. that's not going to be taking me nearly as long to record. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. If you haven't watched the original video as well, be sure to check that out in the description. I would hope you guys watch that before you watch this video, because that gives you some context of what this project is in the first place. But if you haven't, be sure to watch that before you're asking questions about why I'm doing this and whatnot. I answer that kind of stuff in that video. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys later.